So let me try and sort of practice some of this compassion, authentic leadership in introducing the session today. And I'm just thinking, like, you know, I don't want to go on it's not about me, it's about the speakers today, but just a little bit about me. So I've got both an academic interest, I've got to hold a PhD, but also I'm quite highly practical. I love DIY and woodwork and fixing stuff. So if you think about sort of how I might want to use two of those aspects of me, when I was asked to introduce this, I thought, right, what does the research tell us about compassionate, authentic leadership? And of course, I turned to Professor Michael West, who you all undoubtedly know. And a little bit of a quote from Michael West is, compassionate leadership involves a focus on relationships through careful listening to and understanding, empathizing with, and supporting other people, enabling those we lead to feel valued, respected, and cared for, so that they can reach their potential and do their best work. There is a clear evidence that compassionate leadership results in more engaged and motivated staff with high levels of well-being, which in turn results in high quality care. So it's just like a win-win situation here, isn't it? Is that the practice of compassionate leadership not only delivers great care and great services for the people who we serve, but also it provides a better experience for those people who work for us. And so according to the research published in the Harvard Business Review, in terms of authenticity in the workplace leads to benefits such as better relationships with colleagues, higher levels of trust, greater productivity, a more positive working environment. And just who wouldn't want to have those things in their organization? So here's a quote from a Google exec that I found online that kind of illustrates it. And I think it's got a bit of vulnerability in there as well. And some of us undoubtedly have felt this ourselves in terms of being our authentic self in work. So they said, early in my career, I thought that I needed to have a persona or wear a mask to work. But as a more senior leader, I got feedback that people didn't fully trust me because they felt like they don't know me. It was frustrating and eye-opening to me because I was raised to bring your professional self to work and mind your P's and Q's. I learned that people want to have a better understanding of who you are as a human and what your vulnerabilities are. So last bit about me and my practical side. That was the kind of academic bit. And the practical side, as a chief executive of a primary care social enterprise in the noughties, I took on the running of what were, at the time, the worst performing practice in Salford. It was terrible. Things were not going particularly well at all. 6 years of hard work later, we were rated the first CQC rated outstanding practice in the country. And that was a journey absolutely underpinned by those concepts of passionate, authentic leadership that I've just mentioned. Okay, so that's our topic for the day. Hopefully that's kind of warmed you up nicely. Let me just run through the agenda, give you a preview of what's to come. First up is Tracy Neville, and I'll introduce her in just a moment. After Tracy's talk, we've got a short Q&A with Tracy, and then we'll hear from the esteemed Professor Donna Hall, an inspiring leader and remarkable person with whom many of you will be familiar. We then have our very own Sue Holden, Chief Executive of AQUA, who is, as I said, she's currently orbiting the Earth and will be dialing in from the International Space Station. Oh, sorry, wrong notes. She's flying into Leeds Bradford Airport and will speak to you upon her arrival. After we've heard these thought-provoking speakers, we'll join together in breakout groups where we can reflect on what we've heard and how we can use this knowledge to inform our leadership practice. This is really kind of key to what we do here in this masterclass. Yes, we can hear these inspiring people. We can hear those stories which really should be resonating with us. But it's about working with each other about how we can sort of take these and put them into your practice. And so after considering the feedback from your reflection sessions, Sue will be closing the session at midday. Right, let's get on with it. I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with many inspiring speakers, but not many come close to the person that I'm about to introduce to you today. She's the former head coach of the England national netball team and was instrumental. Let me just check my notes. She was instrumental in the team winning their first Commonwealth gold medal in 2018. We'll hear about how she turned around the England netball team from a downtrodden, underfunded programme into a group that achieved one of the greatest team triumphs of the last decade. We'll hear about her experiences as a player, as a coach, and a leader when delivering this session. So please, let's welcome and show our appreciation for the amazing Tracy Neville. I hope I've bigged you up enough there, Tracy.
I'm hoping you can hear me. It's quite weird because I'm actually talking to myself. It's like you're talking to yourself here. So thanks for the introduction, Neil. Can everyone hear me and everyone can see the slides?
We can, Tracy. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Just thank you for the team for inviting me here. And when I spoke to them, they wanted me to take you along some of my journey of how we got, I won't probably say downtrodden, but that's quite a compliment, I think. But a still unfunded national governing body in England netball, from that always bronze, never winning bronze, to a gold medal team. This is in no particular order, but what I'm going to do is just take you through some of the key things. And I'm probably best sharing this at the start for those who obviously have not recognised the name, but we come from probably what people class as a bit of a sporting dynasty. There's Gary Neville, obviously now, who's working quite heavily with Sky Sports on Monday Night Football and in the commentary. And then there's my twin brother, Phil, who is now the Inter Miami head coach out in Miami at the moment. And you look at the sporting dynasty that we've come from, and sometimes people turn around and think that, you know, we had trophy parents, we had people, you know, we had parents who pushed us into sport. And it just never felt like that from the way we grew up. And you talk about environments creating culture creating strong environments, and everyone doing it. And with me, Gary and Philip, that was so the case. Within our environment, we sort of achieved at the same time. We made our national team at the same time, which theirs was Manchester United, and mine at the time was Manchester Thunder. We made international football and netball at the same time at the age of 19, and it feels that sometimes I think that is where some of my ethos and behaviours have come into, because I've been surrounded by two people and two parents who, you know, have done everything they can to push themselves and to be the best that they possibly can. So just taking on the natural leadership, when did I start to become a natural leader? And I obviously, I've never won for a title. I know there's a lot of people that get importance from having something under the name. Having said that, people do take the mick out of me when I do put MBE next to my name. But for me, that is more of an honour rather than more of a possession. But I was always, when I was growing up, if a job needed doing, I used to do it. And I'm very impatient of doing that. And my other half now, Michael, sits around the house and, you know, I can't wait for something to happen. That job has just got to be done so that we can move on to the next thing. And you talk about things doing quickly. That is probably where I am one of them. I just want it done so I can actually move on to the next task. I would like to say that I was the captain of England or a co-captain of England, but I actually never progressed at national or international to be a captain. Does that say that I wasn't born out to be a leader? I don't think it was. I was obviously a captain of the netball team at school, but I'm not sure if that was due to the actual leadership qualities I had, or the fact that I was actually a talented netballer at the time. And I think that's some of the mistakes that we make when we become management, that sometimes your best employees or your best sports people are generally sometimes not always your best leaders.
Tracy, sorry to interrupt, Tracy, but we can't see your slides. I'm not sure if you're sharing them yet, but if you did think you were sharing, we can't see them. And Manar's happy to step in and share if you wanted to, Tracy. Oh, there we go. Yeah, we can see them.
We got them now?
Yeah, fab. Thank you.
Sorry. Oh God, how do I get this on view? Sorry, I thought. Sorry, is that better?
Yeah, brilliant. We're there. Thanks, Tracy.
So I think for me, the first time I started to be a leader was when I was appointed head girl at my school, and I think then that's when I sort of truly recognised my true characters. And I think about the person that I was quite comfortable liaising with the board of governors. I was quite comfortable working with teachers. I was quite comfortable going to awards evening and speaking. But I think the real genuine thing that I really excelled at was that I was really good at creating new ideas, but more importantly, selling them to others and taking them on a longer journey. And although I'm not going to use any clear examples of that, because obviously there's a lot to talk about within my journey within England netball, I think that generally sprung from the family structure that I was around. I'm a great believer when you put something in place as a leader that you need to have structure, you need to have a way of working, you need to have itineraries, and that is genuinely something that all three of us passionately follow and believe in. And although we've all not succeeded in management, sorry Gary, I have to mention that, he is leading in other capacities of his life. And a genuine example of that is when we go on holiday, and the day after when we wake up, a text comes through telling you what time you're going to the gym, what time you're going to breakfast, what time you're going to the pool. And I absolutely love that kind of structure in my life. Michael, my other half, just cannot believe that our family run like that. But that is the sort of diligence and attention to detail that we actually strive on as a family and as a group. I think the other thing that natural leadership I started to develop was that about inspiring other people. I was always good, and it's awful, but no for me is not yet, because I was always good at getting people to step out of the comfort zone. I'm always good at getting people to do stuff or do it before they've realised they've actually said yes. And a great example of that was the coach. I'm actually, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm actually currently sat in Australia in 31-degree heat. Because this person, Tanya Obst, who is the head coach at the Adelaide Thunderbirds, who I'm currently working under, she was the Australian under-21 coach, who has been one of my quite good friends for many, many years. And when I was in the England team, I needed a certain management style around me. She was currently working out in one of the best leagues in the world, having access to some of the best players as an insight into the world's best. And before I knew it, I'd inspired her, taught to her in, applying for the assistant coach role of England netball. And I wanted to see where, we could go as a partnership working, with that much of intel and that much knowledge. And I was able to inspire her to come and work with me. And she always says to this day, I just don't know how I said yes to that. But I don't think she ever regretted that decision when we were stood up on the podium getting that gold medal. I think the next part of the leadership was the togetherness.
To define or do you think that this group of girls can be focused and push it all the way through?
From an outside point of view, I think that makes a big difference. Australia walked off yesterday's game as I had expecting to be here today. England were just elated to be playing off for a gold medal. Is that enough for them? I don't think so, because as I said, they've got a coaching staff that would have allowed them to enjoy that moment, but then got them focused saying it's not good enough just to be here now. Now that we are here, let's go all the way. So I think we're in for a terrific game.
So do I. This is all.
That's Catherine Harvey-Williams, one of the most successful Australian captains of all time, speaking about myself and my coaching team and the team together. And basically she summed it up in that in regrets to why leadership was good for me, because togetherness was one of my things that I really strive to adhere to. And I look at leaders now, and I look at you know, the difficulties and the strengths of leaders, and I think the ability of a leader to create a vision is easy. The ability of a leader to lead people along that vision and towards fulfillment, you know, and it's how many people you take along that journey. And I think through my 4 years at England Netball, that was absolute key for me. One of my visions was I wanted to create the best high performance netball environment in the world, something that nobody had ever done in netball. And that's what stemmed the Roses program. And we started with the creation of the centralized program. And this didn't come off a whim. You saw some great examples of England hockey winning, you know, the gold medal at Rio. You saw some with the cricket. You've recently seen some of the Lionesses' success. This was a creation of professionalization of the sport. This is a young girl growing up with 2 boys, Gary and Phil, in a household where at the age of 4, they had something to aspire to. They wanted to play for Manchester United. That wasn't a dream for them, that was a reality. And for me, I wanted to create something in England Netball. And as a leader, you say, when you want to come in, you want to leave the sport in a better place than when you exited. And I think that is something that people don't aspire to do. Do they come in and just go the mundane 9 to 5, or do they come in to create a difference? The other thing was that netball, it's very semi-professional in England. And for me, I wanted to give girls that dream. And the difference is now when you see young girls out there, they aspire to be netballers. They want to do that full time. I look at my nieces. You see people, some of the older girls who are now on the 20s and 30s, they're wanting to play in the best league out here in Australia. And I currently have one of the English Roses here in my team. So this wasn't just something that I thought was just a dream. It was something that I've grown up with. I grew up with the Alex Ferguson era. I grew up with young lads, young boys who knew that there was success in doing something that they loved. And when I do this, I feel as well that, you know, this wasn't just about taking, you know, a team to another level. This was about, I'm looking at the best league in the world where they're going out every day playing the sport they love. And Australia and New Zealand have been world #1 and #2 forever. Nobody has ever took that spot off them. And I'm a great believer that if you want to compete with the best, you have to be the best. And it's just how you absolutely do that. So what did I do? I think one of the hardest things when I set up the centralized program is that sometimes when you start create a new idea and a new project, there's a lot of people who don't want to come along that journey with you. And it's how you sell that vision to everything else. And I felt that at that particular time, I was a bit like the orchestrator. You know, I was the one that was probably directing the program, directing my vision. But how did I sell that? And I see this a lot of the times in leaders that, you know, they sell a story, they create a vision, and then they exit from that. And there's no completion of that vision. There's no answers to that. So what I did is I visited every single franchise in the country. And that wasn't just in England, that was internationally as well. I spoke to all the best players. I did media interviews. But what I didn't hide behind my vision. I fronted my vision. And did I have complaints about that? Did I have people who went against me? Did I have people who wouldn't work with me? Of course I did. But what they heard my vision, as they say, from the horse's mouth. But along that, I surrounded myself with probably two key people. One was my performance lifestyle person in Helen Alfano, and the other one was my PD, who was like my boss, my performance director, which was Sarah Simonton. And what we did is we had, I say, hymn singers. What they did is they were people who you know, from them points of view, they reach leaders of different groups. So we had my performance director who was linked to the board, the CEO and the rest of the England Netball. And I had my performance lifestyle who was linked to the players, the player association and the club coaches. And what I did is I had two key people who were there to echo my song, you know, to dampen the negativity, to increase the positivity. And I think that's something that when you become a leader, you know, there's a lot of trust, but it's as soon as you get them two people on board, it's about them taking also and supporting you in that journey. The next one is belief. And I'm a great believer in is we become what we think about most. You know, how many times do you say, I can't do that, I'm not good at that, you know, I'm too slow, etc. And one thing that I really start to drive within my team is that every single person, the individuality that forms up a team is absolutely crucial. You know, and I look at this and I think, you know, when I was actually playing, two of my super powers or super strengths was my feeding and my getting free. And what happened was when I was playing is I got to a point in my career when I was about probably 27 where them superpowers started to fade. And that was because different coaches had come along and tried to make every other word here my superpower. And what it was is it got to a point where I actually forgot what I actually was good at and what my strengths were. And I always say that everyone needs a superhero, right? And I definitely believe that during my playing career, these two things really got my 81 caps for England. And I always think to myself, when someone comes into an interview as a leader, or, you know, you're looking at someone within your team, there's something that sparks you about the interest that you have in that particular person, you know, and it sometimes it's acceptable. And I relate that to like a bench ball game. Does everyone know what a bench ball game is? So there's two people at one end. So this is how you say, you know, your best netballers. So basically there's two benches, you put two people on each end, and you put two teams in the middle, whatever, 5v5, and the other team has to try and score by throwing it to the person stood on the bench. And what someone said to me is that people who know sport is that during that time, you start to see those who want to shoot the goal. So if you like football, it's those who are, you know, they call them goal hangers, you know, them who always want to go and shoot the goal. You almost see those who hang back to try and stop the other team shooting. And then you almost get the people who are just crazy, who just run up and down. And I relate that to how your individuals within your team work as you start to go through. Because what starts to happen is, as that person comes in, like for an interview, or the reason why you pick that person up, you start to devalue it. You start to forget about what their superpowers were, because more and more other tasks becomes important. So what happens is you start to have a shift as a team, and your two decisions you make as a leader, and I think these are some of the hardest decisions you make when you're a leader about when you get your team together, is you have to have a shift in mindset. Do feeding and getting free still add value to your particular team, or are them not required now and that person needs to move on? And I think that's the hardest thing for a leader to do. You see a lot of people sat in jobs for long periods of time doing mundane things, but they don't actually move on with the times. And I think as a leader, I always had the creation, that I always had the belief in the team. And, you know, people always ask me, from even to this day, in 2018, I had Amag Bezi as my captain. But when I went into the World Cup the year after, I had Serena Guthrie. And people questioned why I changed my captain along that, because obviously it'd be easy to keep the same captain. But during that particular time, I couldn't keep the same captain because she'd lost the value to the team. She wasn't playing on court, and she was highly injured. She hadn't contributed to a lot of the playing season, and that mind shift had to change as a leader. And you know, and fitness testing results and the eligibility to perform. So I needed someone to go into that World Cup who could lead a team from the front, and this person wasn't able to. And I think that's what's something I'm really strong at, that actually I recognize someone's worth, but I also recognize when that worth has to change, and we can naturally move that person on, or a shift in mindset has to be had around a particular team. I think the next quality I had was about adaptability. And it sounds hard sometimes it can come across quite hard, is I always try and increase my chances of succeeding. And sometimes I think one of the things that I have realised over the particular years is that I have to change my leadership style to suit my team, scenario and events. And I think it's so archaic now. And do I still mix with these sorts of people? Of course I do. I deal with a lot of governing bodies. I believe I deal with a lot of board members. I sit on many groups. And you know that they're of that mindset is of do as I say and not as I do, or you know, if we've always done it like this, we've always done it this way. And I think that's one of the really boring and uninspiring things that I've found that are environments that I really struggle to work in, because I feel that, you know, life moves on and changes need to be made and new experience needs to be had. I look back on my career and the first time I was appointed, I was actually the interim manager at the World Cup in 2015. And I look at my leadership style then, and it's something that I potentially do not hold credible in the way I am and the way I've been brought up, and the leadership style that I've sort of fomented throughout my career. I come in a very difficult scenario. The previous coach had not succeeded at the 2014 Commonwealth Games. She hadn't gone out and won a medal. She'd basically been removed from a position, and they offered me the opportunity to come and be England coach. And, you know, when you're aspiring to be something, I felt that I was too young, but it was something that I wanted to come in and do. But it was really difficult at that particular time because my remit was quite simple. It wasn't to take England netball to professionalisation. It wasn't to take England netball a longer journey. It was basically in 3 months' time, we want you to come in and win a medal. And you look at the types of leadership situations that you get put into. You know, there's times when you have periods of time. So I look at when I did actually get fully appointed, I was there for a 4-year period. But I was basically coming into a 3-year period. I'd never worked with these staff members professionally. I basically, you know, how do you come in? It's like an emergency doctor. You have to make quick decisions, put the best program in place, and you have to go out there and win some sort of medal. And I have to say at that time, something I really regret around that was the lack of compassion in which I come in on that. The team and the staffing team had been in place for 4 years. They'd been on a journey. They'd been on a long journey with this particular leader. They'd also lost someone that they'd highly respected. You know, they'd had vision with, they shared a lot for, they'd worked for. And I look at that and I think, you know, I'd come in, I changed the particular program. I selected a team that was probably out of the remit of where they were thinking before. I got rid of a few staff members, and that comes across quite harsh at the time, but you know, it was difficult for me to succeed in an environment where you were dealing with a lot of animosity and a lot of unexplained behaviour when you were with it for such a short time. What was the consequences of that? So we went out to the World Cup. We did win a bronze medal, so we won our medal that we needed. But was it how I wanted to win it? Was it in the character that I wanted to perceive as me as a leader? And it definitely wasn't. And I'll tell you that they say sometimes when you walk into a room and it takes you 5 minutes, it can take you 5 minutes to take a room or 5 minutes to lose a room. And I was appointed England coach permanently in October the 1st, 2015. And it probably took me about 1.5 years to get my room back due to that particular leadership style that I actually went into. However, leading into that, I did take on a more democratic role, and this is the leadership that I'd formed throughout my success leading into that England role. You know, I see now that, you know, people want to be taken on the journey and they want to be part of the decision-making process. And I personally want to involve others in that. You know, I want to feel inspired by the people around me. And an example of that was my first meeting that I had with this particular group of players was with a company called Changing Minds. And they were a group of people who were like cultures and work with teams on their particular culture. And the Changing Mind group basically took me through, they sat everyone down in a room, and this was everybody within the company. This was the players, the staff, you know, the people that helped us. And we all sat round and they split us all up into groups. And the first thing they asked was, you know, what we did, it was a poster activity, and they asked us, you know, why are we here? And what we don't realize is when we form a team together that people are there for different reasons. Yeah, and that can sometimes cause a lot of animosity within a team. Some people are there for them generally for the money because they obviously want to feed their house. Some are genuinely there because they love netball. Some are genuinely there because, but what we did is through this particular exercise, we actually found common ground of why we were actually working for England Netball and working for this particular team. And the one thing that come out of that room, and that's the first time through my playing and coaching career that I've heard everybody in a room say they're there to win a gold medal. The paths that they took to try and get there, or the paths that they're taking to get there, were completely different. But the one thing that we had as a leadership group and as a team was that everyone wanted to win a gold medal. And that's when I first realised, with my England coach's role, having experienced and played for England Netball since the age of 16, that's when I truly believed that at first that it was going to happen. The next thing was is the fight, and I think this is the hardest thing that I found within my head coach role, or any head coach role, was that leaders have to fight every day to win, and that can take a toll on particular leaders. But actually, some leaders actually thrive from that. You know, individually, I've talked about some of the behaviours that I did over the particular time, but for me, individually, it was about me being a better leader. And I brought two people in to help support that. So the first one is I brought in Waitamaru, who was quite a famous woman within New Zealand, very historic player and coach and high performance out in New Zealand. I brought her over. And I asked her to watch my on-court technical delivery and tactical delivery of the players. And one thing she thought to me was that I wasn't bringing my personality. And for anyone who you obviously don't know me, but I need to laugh. I'm quite loud. I'm quite cheery. I'm quite sociable. And she brought, what she said is, you know, you're in this environment for a long time. You're working with people day in, day out. They need to see that character, that personality that actually drives you on. You know, everything can't be so serious. And that actually really made me think and really supported me. You know, there were times when, you know, I'd been in a really conflicting board meeting or with my bosses or with a player. And then 5 minutes later, I had to come on court. And you know, you say about taking the dirty laundry with you. And that actually was the case at the start when we were having a lot of fights from the players. What it did is, and Tanya Obbs, who I've just mentioned before, that assistant coach, I brought her in place as well to bring out some of that personality. And I think that was what I started to work on. I started to realise how important it was to show that. The next thing was Changing Minds, and I talked about this company. They talked to me about working, you know, better with my staff and players. And you think to yourself, why is she doing this? But again, they taught me to understand bits and parts of my team. So I start to have a personal understanding, or, you know the personalities, because the times when you have to actually shout at someone, or, you know, confront someone on something they've not done, or, you know, you've had a conflicting meeting, and then you had to go and sit with them at dinner. So what I was easy to do is shift my mindset and work with them. And that generally was around personal conversation or knowing something about each of my individual staff members. Also my body language. There was a particular staff member who always got me at a bad time. And I always see people smile when I say this, you know, just as you're in that pressure zone or your bucket's full and you can't take anymore, they come and ask you another question and you just want to bite at them. And what he did is, this Changing Minds guy, he worked with me on, you know, where I could direct them to. So I wasn't becoming across rude or confrontational, or I wasn't trying to avoid that particular person, because this was a staff member who contributed a high proportion to my team and was valuable. but she took up a lot. She wanted a lot of my time, which I didn't have as a leader. So he actually worked with me on how to counteract some of that leadership, so that actually there was a place for her to go and have some of my time without it taking up a lot of my time, if you know what I mean. And the last one was about the fight, was I talked about this centralised programme. And at the time, the players refused to get on board. It was a massive change. There were staff who doubted my decisions. And we had Australia to play in 3 months' time. And our programme started on the 1st of June. And we had 6 players walk into that programme on the 6th of June, having delivered 25 contracts out to that particular players. And you talk about confidence. Some people say, is the times as a leader you're not confident? And there's loads of times as a leader. But what I learned is through that particular process, when we only had 6 people turn up, was that if you've got to only sell your vision, but you've also got to work your vision as well. And at the start, people may not be on board. But as you start to get through that particular process and some of the difficulties, and we got through that different ways. We got through that by doing little groups with these particular players, by targeting key individuals, by working with these players, working with their coaches within the clubs that they were in. And before you knew it, we started to have a online program. And you talk about hardship, and my other half always says that I probably say that was one of the worst times of my life, but my other half always says, yeah, what you start to do is you start to learn a lot about your team members. So we started to lose a lot of staff around that particular time, and it's hard for them. And I always say that, if you don't want to be on the front of the bus, then you need to get off and go and find another place to work in. And it got to a point where you say, with the fight that we had, we got to a point where we did start to have members who actually wanted to share in that vision and move that vision on.
Make this one go on. We know it.
So Serena Guthrie is the girl I was talking about. This was actually at the Commonwealth Games. She wasn't actually the leader at the time, but you can tell the leadership qualities that she's had in bringing that team onto that court and winning that gold medal with the England Roses. And I think for me as a leader is own it is a crucial word when you're thinking about leadership. And I always say I'm motivated by the desire to be better than the opponent, and that is what Serena is getting across there, but also better than my personal best. And it's hard. I've sat in a changing room when I was playing back in, I think it was 2003 at the Jamaica World Cup, and a coach sat in the changing room and basically said, you need to go out here today and win the bronze medal, or else we won't get our funding. And I look at the reasons why I got into netball, and for me, I'm very intrinsically motivated. The reward was the sport itself. There was no money around my sport when I played. And for me, it was about, the desire to be better than the day before. And as a leader, I think that is really crucial. And I think I always say, you cannot ask your team to be better if you're not demonstrating how you can be better yourselves. And I look at how I'm developing myself. So when I started out coaching and when I wanted to be a coach, it wasn't just about, doing my coaching badges. It was about learning my role. So when you go into a leadership role, there's so many caveats that you have to cover and so many people that you have to lead. So I went back to university and did a sports science and nutrition degree. I went and did my strength and conditioning qualification. I went and, I've worked a lot in hospitality and media. I went and did some cardiac rehabilitation and physio work around that particular thing. And even now, I look at where I'm sat now in Australia. I decided to end my career with the Roses to, try for a family. But I've been 2 years out of this now, and I've not worked with an international player for nearly 3-4 years. And what I've done is I've stepped out my comfort zone to move to Australia. because I cannot ask players to be better and play in the best leagues and play against the best opposition if I'm not able to replicate that and coach myself and experience that particular same. So I think when you become a leader, you've got to start owning some of the things that you're asking your team members to do as well. And this is a biggie for me. A lot of leaders, I see it loads of time, it's about training to compete. And I love creating different ways to succeed and winning with the team. And you know, we used to use the old language of goal setting and processes, which for me is so uninspirational. You know, what's your goal setting? For me, it's about how can we create new, you know, do we take risks? Is it to succeed? But most of all, I want to win with this team. And, you know, when I look back at the team that I won with at the 2018, every day I woke up thinking that we were going to win and we were never going to lose. And did we lose? Of course we did. But as a team, we won, because that was part of the process to actually get the end result that we wanted. And I also say this about leaders and about when you put things in places, you've got to treat training like the real deal. And a reflection is my first session that I ever did with them Roses players, that session contributed or was part of the 2018 Commonwealth Games. So everything was planned to the T, that actually we weren't just plodding along. And I see a lot of it with my friends. You know, they go to work 9 to 5. And I say, what did you do today? What did you achieve? What did you succeed? And they're like, well, just the usual day at work. And I feel that for me is not an achievable day. It's not an inspirational day. And you know, you can't win every day. You can't go into battle every day. But for me, it's, you know, people need to know, you know, what they want to get out of that day. You know, have they succeeded? And more important for me is that celebration of success. You know, and we did that in many different ways. You know, sport is so brutal. We went out at the 2019 World Cup and we lost by 1 goal to New Zealand in the semi-final. And that dictated how successful our program was, but it didn't, because from my point of view, every day we go out to win. So whether that is we complete a jigsaw in the staff room, whether that was as a team, you know, we had 1,000-piece jigsaw in the team room. Every day put it in, the last piece, everyone had to be there when we filled it, because that was something we achieved as a team. You know, and there's a lot of things that people do within individually on a daily basis. You know, someone lifts heavier weights in the gym, that was celebrated. You know, and before you know it, what you do is you take away the hierarchy of your team as well by doing that, because you start to recognize the importance. And, you know, you say you've got to earn your time on the bench, and that comes from a lot of archaic behaviors that I feel, because if I reflect back to some of them performances at the Commonwealth Games, it was some of the youngsters that had come in. Basically, they had no history. They didn't know what to expect. What they did is they just went full throttle straight into it and just give it a go. And sometimes you need people in your team to be able to inspire that. But they also felt that they were surrounded by people who give them the confidence, the drive, and the ability to succeed, and they would be celebrated for that as well. And dismantle pressure is also a real great quality of a leadership. And I ask you, how do you prepare your team to thrive under these conditions and still come out victorious? And you know, how do you develop? And I always say this, that, you know, when you ask someone who, you know, is pressure, it's using pressure to your advantage. And I feel that those who feel the pressure most are those who probably go in as a team underprepared. And I take Helen Housby there. You know, for example, and I compare her back to when I started shooting, we had Mark Caldo come over for us. And we went into the shooting program, and I started the shooting program when I was about probably 20. We did it for about a week, and then she went back to Australia, and we never completed that shooting program again. 2 months later, I couldn't even remember it. I look at Helen Halsby there. She has been shooting 200 goals, 300 goals since the age of 8-year-old. This is something that she's been preparing for all her life when she started netball. So for her, shooting, you know, she has shot a winning shot in my 2014, when I was head coach at Manchester Thunder. She shot my winning shot in that final. So that shot that she did in 2018 was a training shot. It was something that she thrived on doing. It was something that under pressure, she took advantage of to make that decision. And I think that good leaders, when you're actually going to selecting your team, you know, it's not just about training them in for one session and thinking that they know. It's about that continued development of that particular person and youngster over that, you know, under that physical and mental pressure. But it's also when you're a leader, I think one of my good qualities is that I've got a really good eye for selecting the right individuals that can manage that particular pressure, or selecting the right individuals at a particular moment to go in there and do something that Helen Halsby did in that particular moment. The next one was the passion. I don't think anyone in netball denies the passion I have. As a successful leader, I almost think that, you know, that you win and remain positive even when you're faced with adversity. And for me, I go to netball every day and never feel like I'm going to work. And someone says that if you love your job, you never feel like you ever have to work in your life. And that was some of the best advice. Netball for me wasn't just something I picked up. This had history to me. This was my close relationship with my mum. This was something about me picking up my first bib at my mum's session and playing with my mum. You know, and you think about how people get into, you know, into your roles and into your teams, and they come from all diverse backgrounds. But a lot of the time is the passion is driven from something that sparked them during that particular journey about why they want to go into that area. And I always say as a leader, you know, and one of the greatest things is about what sort of environment do you put together for your particular team. And so many times, you know, I hear this from leaders go, you know, we need to bring energy today, you know, we need to increase the work rate. And for me, that happened naturally with the team that I put together, because what I did is my job was to build on the technical and tactical ability of that team. My job is not to bring the energy to work, your energy to my place of work, or your work ethic. If you don't want to work, then for me, that isn't something that I should be trying to correct. You should be bringing the energy, you should be bringing the work ethic. My job as a leader was to deliver the correct technical and tactical ability of a team. And once I learned that within my role, I was able to create an environment that naturally brought out that, and be able to put a team together that drove these in each other. So it wasn't just about my leadership, it was about putting together a team that actually they excelled off each other's leadership as well. I promise I'm near the end. I lost time to my Aussie time here, so apologies. The other one was about coachable. And I think this is a hard thing to accept as a leader, but sometimes it's not always about being right, but it's about getting it right. And I always feel as a coach, you've got to, and as a leader, you've got to be considering the feedback as you constantly want to be giving it to the team itself. And it's not often feedback. I always say feedback is not something that you want to hear. And I think one of the things that I really did was that I created a really honest and safe space for the team to do this. We set together 3 people within that particular space. One was sat outside that, one was more of a psychological well-being team, and then the other one was like a doctor or someone like that. But we also have safe spaces where they can contribute to giving you feedback as a leader. And I always say we got to that comfort zone where they always used to ask me what I was like, what was I like under pressure, how were they going to tell me that basically I was being an arsehole that day. And I almost said, like, you know, what am I like under pressure, and when my bucket's full and I'm a bit snappy, I'm a bit on task and stuff like that. And, you know, one of the things I said is generally because I need to go to the gym or I need to talk to my family. And we got to a comfortable space where, you know, people were able to say, Tracy, have you been to the gym today? And, you know, it used to create like a bit of laughter in myself because basically they were telling me I was being an arse that day, but it was a way of them turning around and not actually coming out and saying that quite truthfully to me. But also they had other alternatives around my particular team where they were able to give me feedback where they can directly to myself as well. But also the fact that I always want to be better, that I actually accept that feedback as well. And an example of that was with my players in the 2018 against Uganda. And I reflect back on that particular game because we were playing New Zealand, who we needed to beat. We obviously needed to beat Uganda, but we were probably assured to beat them, or so I thought. And then the next day we were playing New Zealand. And what I did is I put a game plan in from New Zealand into the Uganda game. We actually only won that game by 6, having beaten them 30 goals probably early on in the year. And I remember going into the changing room, and the first thing I did is apologise to my team. And what I did is I showed some vulnerability to my particular team, saying I'd messed up, I'd put my team vulnerable, I'd put us at risk of losing the medal. And that, for me, that was really well rewarded by my particular team. And they actually thanked me for that after, because one of the leaders stood up and said, I'm really glad you're honest there, Tracy. And then they started to be honest with me about where they could potentially have contributed in making that more of a success for us.
(2018) Team of the Year is England netball team.
And as a leader, I think I'm a great believer in humility, and you never ever forget the people that you take along the journey and the people who've contributed to your success, and the vision. It's not just those that are in the moment, it's those that have basically been embedded in history throughout your netballing career. I have run over because I've just literally looked at my watch so many. I did tell you I've talked a little bit too much, so apologies. I know there's questions and answers, so I won't finish that. I'll stop right there.
Tracy, that was truly remarkable and amazing. What I'd like to do is, for everybody on the call, please, could you show your appreciation for Tracy in the traditional way? Please just unmute for just a few seconds and let's give Tracy a round of applause, please. Come on, let's do this. So much emotion in those slides that you've shown, but yet so much kind of insight that you've brought. It's been a real pleasure and a privilege to listen to your fascinating story, Tracy. A remarkable journey, and what I loved is how you've been able to distill that down into these real essential, vital, and inspiring ingredients. You know, I loved the clarity of the vision, you know, win a medal, but yet, you know, oh, so much work in actually working that vision. The support that you're the nous to bring around you, the common ground that you created, the belief you shaped, the difficult conversations that you did not shy away from. And it's really like fascinating as well about how you can see that thread back to your early days growing up with that ambitious, talented siblings, with that sort of potent mix of raw determination for success, with a nous to kind of work it out and how to get there. So I know throughout your talk there, Tracy, colleagues on this call have come up with some really interesting questions for you. So we've got about 5-10 minutes, so we've not got a huge amount
Please
of time.
don't mention the United
that.
result last weekend.
So this is question time now, Tracy. So Louise, have we got a question from the floor, please, that you'd like to read?
I think Anne-Marie and Denise have been monitoring the question chat box.
Okay.
So I'll bring those in.
Anne-Marie or Denise?
Hi,
Nice to meet
hi
you.
Tracy. So we've got a question here from Jackie saying you spoke about recognising when team members are no longer providing value to the team, but how do you move that person on?
So that was the probably difficult thing for anyone when you move that person on. One of the things what I did is I put a massive selection criteria around each individual player, and that selection criteria didn't just happen at once. So there'd been parts of history where people have been in the England team for 4 years, and then suddenly it gets to like a major comp, and then they just get escalated, and that in itself is not a great behavior from any team or member of staff. So what happens is around that selection criteria, the players were fed back to every 6 weeks or after every competition, and they were constantly kept up to touch on that selection criteria. The best part of it that I did keep in place was that actually the team did a lot of work on their culture and values, and people who were matching up to them particular values and behaviours, and they come up with a way of marking each other on the behaviours and giving good examples of when people were using them behaviours. And there was a particular athlete in the team who was a very exceptional player, very good, but she wasn't taking part in the team things. She wasn't being part of the culture. She wasn't, she was constantly irritating a lot of the team members. And we had everyone has a leadership group. We speak about that a lot. And to be honest, it was actually quite good, because it actually got to a point where the team was actually getting rid of these sort of, what do you call it, vermin members, people who, weren't on the front of the bus. So it actually didn't really come to a point where it's, did it come down to a selection decision? It wasn't. What we tend to do is we created a culture and environment where actually that team member just moved on, or left the actual vicinity. So even when we removed the first captain to get the second captain, everyone, it was not a shock to any of the players. I'm not saying the captain dealt with it very well, because she didn't, but she knew it was happening. Because actually she knew the process that we'd gone through for the last 4 years, and she'd been part of that process. She'd shared in what that process looked like, so she knew what the process was. But what she didn't like was the ending, and that is sometimes very difficult. And you say about that as well, but we did put a good support team around us. So a lot of the time we didn't have the money. If I look at Phil when he was a Lionesses coach, he had 25 million for his budget. We had 1.2 million. That's the sort of money we were working off. I had one coach. He had 10 coaches. I had one physio. He had 6 physios. That's the sort of comparison we were having. But it's what you do, isn't it? It's like me through my life. I had to go out and work. I had to go and educate myself. My brothers went and played for Man United. Did I look at that negatively? No. What I did is I steered my own direction in life. And I think that's where you've got to be really positive, and, you can't be looking on what someone else is doing. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Tracy. So it really came across in your presentation about how you creating the climate and the environment, and then the transparency that you talk about, so that it doesn't come as a surprise to people when they're not meeting that mark. We've got time for another question.
Yeah,
I've got another one from the floor.
Yeah, I've got one here. There was a few questions around a similar topic, and these were around including what do you think why do you think that there aren't more female leaders in men's sports, And do you think that gender impacted on your leadership, and what were the barriers due to your gender? And what can men in sports careers jobs support the progression of women's sports? And then there's just one other that was sort of on that similar
I'll never remember all these questions.
I suppose they're all sort of related to sort of that,
Answer
that
yes,
gender side.
Tracy, that's the...
Do you know what? Someone gave me a fact the other day. I was actually on a panel, and they actually said for every director of sport job in England, there's 38 male applicants and only 2 female. And I actually was shocked at that? I don't think I was, because I look at myself and growing up, and there's not them opportunities that we have to be able to take on. So when I start out, it was common. I could have dropped out of netball because there's a massive ethos on parents with females, because the opportunities are quite minimal. They want them to get their education so they can go on to be bigger and better things. So, we have a fight with parents all the time that, education is so important to females, because, a footballer can turn out at 16, 17, 18, and before they know it, they've got a back pocket full of money, where that's what they aspire to do. It's the norm for them to do that. I think differences are changing. As I say, I don't think there's opportunities. I think one of the difficulties I had was that England Netball supported me, huge amounts, and wanted me to stay on when I wanted to have a family. But the family life and the support around coaches and having babies is just not there. I don't want to go on tour without my little baby. I don't want to come out to Australia without my 2-year-old little boy. But if I come out here, the money for me to be able to do that is a lot of money. And I'm in a fortunate position that I'm actually with a partner who is actually able to still carry on working out here. But, to move my family out here was a massive move. We don't have a coaching support group. We don't have anyone supporting us. So, we talk about people being removed from coaching positions. When you're a mum, and I wanted to take a year out or 2 years out, you just can't do that in high performance sport and expect to come in at the best you can, because, the sport moves on so quickly, and there's just no support system around it. You don't get maternity leave. You don't get, you can't say, oh, by the way, I'm not going to come here for 12 months, but then I'm going to miss a World Cup. To have an interim coach when you've been building for a program for 4 years is very, very difficult. And even when I was playing, there wasn't the support system. Nobody had children when I was playing netball, because you just didn't have time, because you just couldn't take that time away from your job or from netball and still think you could come back in. The environment now is changing. It's hugely changing. But for coaches, I don't think it is. And I don't think there's a lot of, there's not a lot of role models or ambassadors to be able to support you through that. You go on one of my friends went on one of the FA coaching level 1s, and there was 1 female to 19 men. The environments where, when you go into an environment, you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel inspired, you want to be around, I'm not saying you want to be around females all the time, but you want to be around, like-minded individuals and stuff like that. But it's a difficult environment to get into, and if you don't have the correct support, it's a lack of, it doesn't drive confidence as well, and security.
Tracy, thank you so much. We've come to the end of that time slot. I want to say a huge thank you for the inspirational journey you've described, and taking the time out today to come and tell us all about it. I think we've all taken away things from your talk, Tracy, and that legacy will ripple out through I think it's 130 plus people that we've got on this call today. So thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I can now hand over the chair to my colleague Sue Holden. Sue is now in front of a laptop, and I can safely kind of hand over to Sue. Sue, are you there?
I am.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sue. I'm so pleased that you've been able to join us. I know that you've kind of moved mountains to get here today.
And some snow this morning, and some
snow. I just know how many, the planes, trains and automobiles kind of thing. You've been there and you've done it. But what a remarkable leader in the face of adversity you truly are. I'll hand over to you, and Sue, you can pick up the remaining part of the session. It's been a pleasure to open on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to say that I was able to listen to the majority of Tracy's presentation, but I was listening to it in the car on the phone. And I think that Tracy really touched on some really key elements around leadership. And I'm delighted now to invite Professor Donna Hall, who's going to talk to us really from a different perspective. I think Donna has a reputation of being innovative, challenging, but most of all has an ability to land a vision across a wide group of stakeholders. Now, I think that that's particularly important when you take some of the comments that around leadership that Tracy's made, around how you engage people in that vision. And I think Donna really exemplifies how you do that in a way that benefits those stakeholders. So I would like to hand over to Donna. Thanks, Donna. And to give you a different perspective on leadership, because I think it's really key that we look at it through different facets. So I'm going to hand over to Donna and look forward to your presentation, Donna.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Sue. And yeah, it's really hard to follow Tracy, isn't it? Oh my goodness. She's brilliant. What an inspiration. So first of all, can I start with an apology? I know this is a masterclass, but I wouldn't describe myself as a master or as an expert in any of this leadership stuff. And I'll be honest, I'm not one of those people who've studied leadership as a theory. I'll be honest, I've kind of just gone from one job I've really enjoyed to another job I've really enjoyed, and tried different things and asked people what is working and what's not working. And I wouldn't subscribe to any kind of theory of leadership. And I mean, my first example, I'm going to be quite honest and quite personal and link it back into some of my lived experience, some good and some bad and some, ugly as well, if that's okay. So I think my first experience of kind of being a leader, I remember, I won't say where it was, but I went into this role with real trepidation. I didn't see myself as a leader at all. I saw myself as Donna from Bolton. I'm adopted as a child. And I think very often people who are adopted or who've got this kind of feeling that they're not quite good enough a little bit. And you'll see, I don't know if you've ever read any of the work by Lem Cisse, who was fostered and then, had quite a difficult start in life. And, he talks a lot about displaced children and how they very often have to feel they have to work harder and do more to fit in and to be good enough. So I think a little bit of that motivates me, I'll be honest. So I remember going in to see the chief exec when I got my first leadership role. It wasn't a particularly senior role, but I was terrified, absolutely terrified that I'd got this leadership job, and it had people management, which I'd never done before. And I remember going in, and all her books on her shelves were about leadership, and they were all about kind of the theory of leadership and how, this, that, and the other. And she'd been to Harvard to study leadership and all this, really, really impressive stuff. But when I got to kind of know the organization better and ask staff, they didn't know her, and they didn't know what she stood for, and they didn't know her as a person. And that really worried me, because I think, it's leadership isn't about studying as Tracy's just exemplified beautifully, studying the theory in an ivory tower and then enacting it upon, a willing group of people. It's a dynamic process. It's constantly changing, and it changes its horses for courses. It changes in different circumstances and under different pressures. So it's brilliant to see 130 of you here today, which is fantastic. I think it's one of the highest that you've ever had in this series. So that's fantastic. And I think I really appreciate your time when you are really under the cosh, whether you work in local government, whether you work in the NHS or whatever your role is. I think if we're thinking about crisis and compassionate and authentic leadership in a crisis, then, I don't think we've had as many crises all compressed into one small time period ever in a generation. So obviously COVID was huge, is huge still in terms of the impact on elective care, on our workforce, on the high number of people who lost their lives, on leaders who lost their lives actually through COVID, and the pressures that our staff were under and staff losing their lives too, and the family members whose lives were lost. So a huge amount of pressure in managing of a pandemic. And I think we kind of went into crisis mode, didn't we, in the NHS? Obviously, war in Ukraine in the last 12 months has put a different complexion on things. And I think finally the cost of living crisis, which is real and kind of impacting on, again, our workforce and the people that we serve as public servants. So a huge amount of crises, multiple crises, all happening at once. And there's a danger that we kind of resort to that command and control transactional leadership at times like that. NHS England loves going into Opal 4, where it can issue instructions and tell us what we have to do, and that's not good, and it's not sustainable. We can't operate at that level of crisis management, and we certainly can't turn services inside out to face the public, which is what I personally feel we need to do more of if we are in that crisis management kind of mindset. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the starting point for leaders in terms of thinking about their role. And I think one of the things that isn't accepted and isn't spoken about very often by leaders, whatever sector you work in, is the broken nature of public services in this country at the moment, in the UK at the moment, fundamentally broken. And, I think people might feel a bit scared, a bit nervous, feel that's a bit too risky to say out loud. But I think, I'm speaking to a group of leaders here. I think it's important that we do acknowledge that we cannot continue to operate in the way we have done. We've had, local government has had huge amount of funding cuts, virtually half its budget's gone in the last 12 years. And that really impacts on social care, which in turn impacts on the NHS. So I think we do need a different model of public services, which is not actually just about more money. I think very often we can say we just need more money and we can carry on and everything will be wonderful. I think we need to develop a completely different system of public services based on a citizen engaged role and a sort of new social contract with citizens in a different environment. And I'm not sure if everyone's read a fantastic book, which I refer to very regularly, but if you haven't, it's great. And if somebody could perhaps post a link to it in the chat, I would strongly encourage you to read it and buy it. But it's called Radical Help by a woman called Hilary Cottam, Cottam. And she's a kind of social entrepreneur who travels the world and does lots of work in various countries around reforming public services. And Radical Help is all about radically shaping the nature of public services and really breaking the mold about the role of public services, because I think we've changed so much since the creation of the welfare state, since the Beveridge report. Things have moved on so much, and yet we've still got that same kind of 1940s constructed model of public services, which was based on a 1940s factory at the time, which was very much top down. Everyone will get the same, and this is how it works. Thanks, Louise. That's great. We've got the link to Radical Help there. So I'll just talk a little bit about some of the stuff we did in Wigan. Yeah, it is a brilliant book, Gemma. And it was, some of it was based on the thinking of Hilary. So we got Hilary to come and work with us in Wigan in a place called Worsley Mains, way before I started, actually. It was the leader at the time, Lord Peter Smith, who'd met her in the House of Lords and brought her into Wigan. And what she did was remarkable, really. So we were working with 25 families in Worsley Mains whose children were on the edge of care, children's social care. And what we found was we mapped out everything we'd done to support those families over the last 10 years. And that was children's social care, the criminal justice system, housing, education, welfare, GP practices, the police, everybody who'd been involved in the lives of those families and those children. And we found that on average, every year for the last 10 years, we'd spent between $250,000 and $500,000 per year per family. And yet at the end of the year, the outcomes for those families and their children were worse or the same as they were at the beginning. So, you know, I think what that taught us, and we'd spent 80% of our time on assessment, continued assessment and referral through a fractured system. So we realised that we couldn't continue to work like that. This is back in 2010-11. And that lots of our resources, lots of our money was going on a very transactional, very top-down, very paternalistic way of working with citizens, almost sitting and waiting in A&E for them to come in, rather than going out and thinking, what can we do differently to support them to live the best lives? So we extensively worked with Hillary's, and rather than just having it as an interesting experiment, this is, I think, a real role of leaders, is stop doing interesting experiments. One of the roles of leaders is to develop, as Tracy said, that belief system, and to really shift the cultural dial away from transactional silo services, whether it's within the NHS, within local government, or between the NHS and local government. Let's think differently about our role. Let's think about our role as enablers, of relating to people in a different way and in a more human way, rather than behind a clipboard, assessing them on the basis of various eligibility criteria. And that tends to be what we do, particularly when we face cuts, which we all have done over the last 12 years, is that we measure, we resource our priorities based on a kind of deficit model. So we say to citizens, you can't access these services that we've designed in a darkened room that we know you will like. You can't access them until you're really bad. And if you're not really bad, go away, get worse, and then we might consider you being able to access this limited menu of services that we deem to be good for you. You know, and that, I feel, is what's wrong with public services at the moment. We need to really radically rethink the role of public services, not as gatekeepers, but as enablers. And I think that selling of the vision, as Sue referred to, was what really we all got behind in Wigan. That wasn't just the council. Initially, it was the council, but it became the NHS, schools, businesses, everyone kind of bought into the deal. And the good thing about it is, one of the things that Tracy mentioned, which I really believe in, is that strategy and vision shouldn't just be about the leader of the day, the leader at the time. And I think very often, you know, I've been doing some work in places where they've had 4 chief execs in 7 years. And every time a new chief exec's come in, they've had a new vision, because there's a thing about ego that kind of means that you have to have your own vision. It has to be about you. And yet it shouldn't. It should be about the place and the staff who work to support, and the people who the strategy is there to serve. So my background is strategy and policy. I didn't ever see myself as a leader, I'll be honest, but I've written hundreds of strategies and policies and bid for funding in various councils, mainly in the northwest of England. None of anything that I've done, which is quite depressing, has ever worked. I'll be honest, none of it except the deal. And the reason for that is because it's about a relationship. It describes a relationship rather than just a set of objectives and, you know, a changed culture. It talks about the relationship between the citizen or the patient and the state. And it describes that and it articulates that. And it's constantly evolving. So it's still going on today. You know, the council and partners still have it, you know, it's changed quite a bit, but that's how it should be. But that fundamental thing about describing a social contract, describing a relationship. And one of the things that the King's Fund said, which was kind of different about the deal in their evaluation of it, again, I don't know if you can post that in the chat, anyone, but it's called Lessons Learned from the Wigan Deal. And it's really accurate. They came to kind of live with us while they wrote it, and they spoke to staff, they spoke to residents. So it wasn't just people saying, this is wonderful, buy into it, it's amazing. They actually asked people, how does it work? And they were just struck by 2 things, really. One was clarity of purpose. Clarity and simplicity of purpose. And I think that is the job of leaders, even more so in a crisis. You cannot be a leader if you've not clearly articulated and started to get the buy-in of everyone, staff, elected members, if you work in a council, partners, the people around that vision. So clarity and simplicity of purpose. And that was the deal. It was simple. It was easy to understand. We got it across to everyone. It was on one piece of paper. You know, how many people have read strategies that are like this thick, but no one can remember a single word? You know, I've written loads of those things, and you know, they're in the bonfire of crap strategies. Sorry, I know I shouldn't swear, but awful strategies that don't make a difference. You know, we have values that are written up on our walls in organizations that people don't really believe in because they're not lived. So it's incredibly important that we make it real, and that we have that simplicity and clarity of purpose, and that it is embedded and real within organizations. And the second thing the King's Fund said was around constancy of purpose. So instead of it just being a flash in the pan strategy, where basically, you know, you come up with a plan, the leader and the chief exec go around and talk to staff, and it's all, you know, wonderful, and there's razzmatazz and staff awards, and everyone's clapping and smiling. And then a couple of years later, the chief exec leaves, a new one comes in, and it's a new strategy. So basically the strategy sticks. Whether the leaders come and go, the strategy is about the place and the organization, and it outlives leaders and their egos. And that, I think, is the beauty of good strategy. So, and I do think whether you're a strategist or not, your leadership role is to embed that strategy, to create it, to really sell that vision, but not a meaningless fake vision. You know, I see a lot of visions that are just sugar-coated. They're not real. You know, they're kind of, everything's wonderful, isn't it? And that really beneath it, frontline teams, no, it isn't. You know, I think there's nothing worse than that kind of fake leadership. And, you know, I really would guard against people kind of adopting that model of let's pretend everything's amazing when it's not. Let's be honest with each other when things are really bad. You know, as Tracy said in her talk earlier on, you know, when things got really to a really low ebb, let's be honest and share how we're feeling and talk about how bad things are. And, you know, I think creating that honest environment where people can have those conversations, just pretending everything's okay doesn't wash, because people can see through it. People are not daft. And authenticity isn't just about the leader. It's about everyone being seen as being authentic, and everyone's voice is being as important as everyone else, as each other's and everyone else's. And for me, I've always prided myself, because I'm quite shy. You might not think it. I'm speaking to 120 odd people, but I am quite shy naturally and an introvert. I've always tried to pick out the smallest voice in the room when I'm in a meeting with people, and you can't do enough listening as a leader. So we did something amazing called Listening into Action, where we went and spoke to people, did 10 minutes speaking and about 75 minutes listening. And it took a couple of years for people to actually feel confident to say something negative in those meetings. And they were everyone, you know, the people who went to the bins, people who were in charge of senior policy and everything in between. But people eventually felt that they could say what wasn't good. And then we did something about it. So it was listening to people, and then not just going away and doing nothing about it, which I've seen happen a lot. I've seen organizations where they see the chief exec once in 10 years and that's it. You know, the chief exec and the leaders, all leaders need to be known. And then people need to know what you stand for and what your reaction is going to be like and how you are as a person. I think it's really, really important. So that selling of the vision and that core purpose is really important. I think really trying to pick on the spark plug people in organizations, you know, the people who really get things moving, whatever their job, and really trying to nurture them and talent spot them and really give them that confidence that sometimes they don't have. Really pick up on the people ever that we had an amazing spark plug person who actually worked in a very back office function in Wigan, but we kind of gave her that platform and we really believed in her. We did something called the Be Wigan experience, which was great. It was an organizational development thing initially, but it became a system development experience eventually. It won all sorts of CIPD awards, but it was basically hosted by frontline staff. That's the important thing, talking about their values, talking about being positive, being accountable and being courageous. And courage was a really important value for us. going back to the idea of public services being broken, we knew we had to try new things to change the perception of public services and to make them more enabling, more listening, more authentic. And during that time period, our satisfaction with the public went up 59%. So we were making £160 million worth of savings through austerity. But at the same time, we were investing in the community, investing in listening, investing in staff as the kind of ambassadors of our organisation. 80% of them lived in the place. Let's use them as ambassadors and people who could give the messages to citizens. People never remember what you say, but they always remember how you made them feel. So I think the thing that Tracy said around being valued and being really listened to, I don't mean just like going to an event and there's a photo opportunity for the chief exec or for leaders, you know, they put it on Twitter, we've had a great time, I've been and done this on the front line. It's actually really listening and triangulating. I'm sure you know the brilliant chief exec Owen Williams at Northern Caroline. So one of the things Owen once said to me, we were at an event like this and somebody said, what is the core job of a chief exec? And Owen said triangulation, triangulator in chief. And I think that's really true. You can be told that the higher up you get, the less honest people are with you. And I think having that acknowledgement, you know, and being really honest about that is you need to go out there yourself and find out if what you're being told is actually real. And that triangulation to make sure it actually is real, and that there's not pockets of dissatisfaction in the organisation. There always is. It would be, you know, some of you are running organisations with 10,000 people. It would be completely wrong if there was no dissatisfaction in an organisation that size. It's natural for there to be people who are fed up and who need a bit more listening to and then a bit more action taking on their behalf. I think showing vulnerability, as Tracy said, is really important. And that thing around being personally resilient, I think it's really, really hard. So whilst I was a chief exec, I lost my mum, I lost my partner at the time, unexpectedly very young. I had issues with my children, all various life stages they were going through. And it's really hard to show that vulnerability when you've got this mask on that Tracy referred to. But I think people appreciate you being really honest and open and you're showing your vulnerability as a leader. I think gone are the days where you had to be perfectly suited and booted and always look the same and always be the same. Just, you know, have days where you cry. I've cried in front of my teams, you know, when I felt absolutely at a really low ebb. I think this thing around really kind of fake leadership, I think I've tweeted about it the other day and it got lots and lots of it went crazy. But I really do think this thing around just pretending everything's okay is really scary, particularly in healthcare organisations. It's not okay at the moment. We've got, you know, we are on our knees and people are on their knees. So I think a real over acknowledgement of that and an acknowledgement of how people feel is very, very important. And this thing around, I don't know if you come across it, but toxic kindness, you know, where people feel like be kind to everyone. It's like, well, look, you know, people are on their knees, people have got no money. You can't be kind to someone when you live in a tower block with 3 kids and you're on your own, you've got no money to pay the gas bill. You know, I think there's this kind of Victorian thing around kindness, which, you know, I love being kind. I think it's really important, but it's not everything. There are huge issues around equality of access to services, huge issues around the fundamental role, our role in public service reform in the UK at the moment. So yeah, I mean, I think that's all I really wanted to say. Be bold, be courageous. The thing that we're guaranteed to, if we take a very risk-averse approach, which sometimes the NHS can do, and we just pretend everything's okay and we just muddle on because NHS England tell us we have to do that, it's not honest. Then, you know, I think we've got to be honest about the broken nature of public services, but have that courage to take a risk and recreate something else. You know, you look at social care, you look at the queuing ambulances outside hospitals. For me, integrated care systems need to pass some of their budget over to social care and to public health. We need to take some big risks like that. You know, think about prevention in a systemic way, not just an ad hoc way. We still don't know the public health grant. In a few weeks' time, public health people are going to be made redundant because we don't have understanding of the public health grant. So we are I'm going to be honest, we're in a dysfunctional government in its dying days. And we as public service leaders have to make the best of it. So sorry, I got a bit political at the end, but just being honest. And I hope that's okay. Thank you.
Absolutely okay, Donna. And reading the comments in the chat box. I think it's your honesty that really has shone through and that has really motivated people and given you that connection and them that connection with you. So I'd like to open it up for questions. But I think there was a question posed very early on. Louise, I don't know if you managed to pick that up for me or one of the team.
Yes, was it the one regarding, do you think leadership comes naturally to some people?
I thought that was quite a canny question, really.
That's a really good question. No, I think everyone is a leader. I'll be honest. I don't think there are people who are leaders and people who are non-leaders. You know, I think we have, I had to be, I'll be honest, I personally had to be pushed into doing it. And I'll be honest, I'm speaking really honestly now, the first 2 times I became a leader, I only applied for it because it had been advertised twice and no one had got it. And it was my manager. It was going to be my manager. And somebody said to me, Donna, they took me up to one side in the ladies' toilets and said, if you don't go for it, we might get a plonker managing us. And that was my primary motivation, was not wanting a plonker to be my manager.
I think that's probably the strongest motivation I've ever heard, to be truthful. Because, you know, I think that what you've just highlighted there is a good leader creates an environment for people to do good work. You get a plonker, you know it's going to be hard work, even if the work you're doing is good. So really good motivation there. Have we got any other questions that we want to just put to Donna? Can I just say to everybody on the call as well, we've purposefully built into this session an opportunity for people to have time for reflection. And so that people will be put into smaller groups after I've done my 2 penneth. Then people will have a chance to be able to talk about it, because leadership is personal. And I think what you've highlighted, Donna, is you've been very personal, not only in what you said, but what's very clear in how you've been. And I think that if we are going to get the most out of these sessions, that opportunity to reflect and think, so what does that mean for me? What bits of me am I not bringing up? What bits of me are not being allowed to come to the fore? So that's been built in. So any questions from anybody that's been picked up in the chat?
Yeah, we've got a great question here from Maggie Boyd. How can ICS get into different conversations and relationships with their citizens? Because currently much of the focus is on developing more systems.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I am an ICS systems advisor to NHS England, so I'm working with quite a few systems, and it's absolutely really source of a great frustration to me, the fact that we just keep talking about governance and who's on which bloody committee. I don't care who's on which bloody committee. What are you going to do? What difference are you going to make in 5 years' time? And I've read strategy after strategy, and it's motherhood and apple pie. There's no real substance about what people are going to do practically to make a difference to their population's lives. And the only way, as Chris Ham said, ex-chief executive of the King's Fund, is we need a deal for the NHS and ICSs with citizens. We need to talk about kind of rights and responsibilities. You know, we need to have that honest conversation. We just keep trying to do everything. And it's just, we're worn so thin that services are rationed and unrecognisable, and waiting lists are huge, as people know. So, you know, I think we've got to really reach out, have that 2-way conversation and dialogue. You know, I think we've just got another layer now, haven't we? ICS is telling foundation trusts what they have to do, and it's like, no, we've got NHS England to do that. We don't want another layer. We want more action in communities. For me, it's about neighbourhoods, populations of between 30 to 50,000. Get our frontline workers together. Get community midwives working with practice managers, with primary care networks, with housing officers, with police officers, you know, to really understand the nature of the families that we serve. Do risk stratification to find out who those families are. We managed to reduce unplanned admissions by 30% within a group of people who were some of them going to A&E every day. But we'd never treated them any differently to people who were going like every 10 years. So, you know, let's do something like that, which is turn the organisations inside out to face the public.
Thanks, Donna. I think if it's okay with the team, I'd like to sort of move in to sort of, and you touched a little bit at the very end there, Donna, for me, around, I suppose, the element area lens I would like to bring. And then we make sure we do have that time for reflection. But can we just thank Donna? I hope you're able to stay on a little bit, Donna. It'd be brilliant if you were. So can we... So for those of you who don't know, I'm Sue Holden and I'm the Chief Executive of AQUA. But prior to joining AQUA, I was the National Director for Intensive Support. And that was from 2019 to 2022. And it was following an appalling reorganisation in NHSE, which they seem to be particularly adept at following through in a second round. But what I'd previous to that been the lead improvement director for NHS Improvement, working with organisations in special measures. And organisations in special measures, particularly, were in the spotlight for everything that was wrong. And it had become, and in this, these are in the words of Ted Baker, the then Chief Inspector for Hospitals, CQC, toxic. And it had also become a stick to beat organisations with. And I was really, really clear that the previous 5 years, if they'd taught me nothing, had taught me that there's more good stuff that's happening in organisations than bad stuff. But when you get in the spotlight of the media and the focus is only on the bad stuff, it becomes really, really hard to shift that perspective and to shift it in a way that is authentic, that is transparent, and that is honest. And Donna and Tracy both talked a lot about bringing yourself as a leader. And people who have known me for a long time will say that, and I've had it in 360, what you see is what you get. And I do think that there is something about, you've got to stick true to your values, even when you're working in a context that maybe isn't as enabling as you would want it to be. And I do think that the other thing that was really key for me, it was to change the way we supported organisations. So previously, the way in which special measures worked was that when an organisation was deemed to be inadequate, either for financial or for quality reasons, by CQC, that's my husband bringing me a cup of coffee, given I haven't had one since 8 o'clock when I was in Amsterdam, so apologies. And he usually comes in as a blur in the background, so that's bringing a bit of me here, isn't it? But I can't find the flipping blur thing on this. Anyway, so what they get is they get labelled, and then everybody swoops in and they get offered lots of support and help. And I'm going to do that when I say help. And what I mean by that is it's help as judged by others. It wasn't help as judged by the organisation's leadership or even the people providing services. It was felt to be very punitive. So one of the things that I wanted to be able to do, having been given the role and told to bring together financial and quality special measures, which was an interesting experience in itself, given that I had half of Stephen Hayes' old team, accountants, and the NHS Improvement directors that were focused on quality. And there's some very different behaviours and skills, not the most natural mix, a bit oil and water at times. But what I was really clear about was that we had to shift the conversation with our chief executives and respect the roles that they had. You know, they didn't just get there by chance. They had been appointed because they had skills and knowledge and capabilities that were deemed needed in that organisation at the time. and the context within which they were operating had changed. And there had been mistakes, whether that was failures to deliver on fundamental standards, or whether there had been a critical incident. And what I felt very strongly was we had to get alongside organisational leaders and work with the skills and abilities that they had, because they had them, but they'd been dialed down because they felt that they had to follow the rules. So being able to work alongside and craft an approach to improvement that had meaning for them, that they felt that they could get behind and make a difference, was critical. Donna mentioned listening into action. There's various different ways to do that. But if you're not listening at the very senior level, and especially from a regulatory perspective, then actually what you're doing is you're reinforcing what was, rather than supporting where you need to go and where they need to be as organisations. So I set about doing three things. The first thing that was really important for me was to establish relationship with the CQC and with the Department of Health. I met with CQC probably 2-3 times a week, with Department of Health probably bi-week, every other week really. And that was to try and start to give confidence that the approach we wanted to take to supporting organisations that were challenged and in difficulty was going to be more collaborative. It was going to be about working with them to design an improvement approach and bringing people at the right time that they could work with and that added value to what they already had within the organisation. And so you have to build credibility. And I think that's one of the things around leaders. You have to follow through on what you're saying you're going to do. You know, it's no good having the nice vision and strategy, as Donna's alluded to, and also Tracy, if you can't deliver on the small things, because you have to follow through so that people can build trust in you. I think that's one of the things that at the moment that is lacking. There is a lot of mistrust between individuals, between organisations, and we've got to start to create an environment where we believe each other again, where we don't have to second guess or check, and that if we say we're going to do something, we actually do it. So that was the first thing for me. The second thing was I needed to get rid of the label special measures. It was not helpful. It wasn't helpful to the organisations in terms of recruitment, reputation, being able to generate a sense of pride in an organisation, because there were as many glimpses of brilliance in those organisations that were in special measures as there were areas that needed further improvement. And I wanted to change the language. I was fed up of hearing failing organisations, broken organisations. Actually, there were organisations that weren't just hitting the standard that we should be doing, and we needed to put our arms around them. Sometimes that was in real time, actually, and recognise that some of those leaders actually went to those organisations. They went because they believed they were able to make it better. And the third bit was, for me, you have to remember who's on the receiving end of your leadership. How does it feel to be on the receiving end of me? And that's at the very interface of care. That's at the very interface of ringing and making an appointment. That's interactions with colleagues from different sectors. A level of understanding as to how you impact is critical for a leader. And investing in understanding yourself. And I have used this phrase with some chief execs, make yourself the project. You're really good at wanting a project plan for whatever. Well, actually, what's your project plan? How are you going to improve you? What are the inputs that you need to ensure that you are the best you're able to be? So one of the things that I was very fortunate to be able to do was I was around at the time when they were rewriting the Health and Social Care Bill and also the new operating framework for the NHS. Now, anybody that knows me knows I don't do detail. I can't be arsed with it. However, there are some things that you have to do detail on. And one of the things that I was really, really clear about is that in the new operating framework, I needed to be able to craft our element of it so that we separated out the judgment that an organisation needs help from how they receive the help. I wanted to separate out. And so I actually got rid of the name special measures because I managed to persuade the department, NHS England and CQC that it wasn't helpful. And we now nationally have something called a recovery support programme. And I'm proud of that change in language. Recovery support. Things are going to get better. We are going to recover. And our role then was to put that support around the people that would do it. Because it wasn't about my team, it wasn't about us. We would be there for a period of time and we'd go. It was about that organisation, those individuals signing up for a continuous improvement journey, that they would keep going long after we were there. So the recovery support programme then meant that the regions now currently make the judgment that organisations need national support. So they're put into segment 4. And at that point, we have a conversation to say, what have you already got going on? What's the good stuff? Where have you got examples that you can use in your own organisation? How can we facilitate that? So we spent a lot of time building that trusted relationship with those chief executives and those senior leaders so that they had confidence we were there to help and genuinely provide support, not to add to the stick. Because one of the critical elements was I took the decision to embed teams around organisations and in organisations, not an individual, because you need that difference, that different perspective. And Donna mentioned triangulation and Owen, and absolutely being able to be in an organisation and wander around, go on nights, go and spend a period of time on nights. Believe me, you'll see the reality of an organisation on nights. Go and see how people have to deal with things when there are no managers or other senior clinical people around. Decision making is phenomenally risk orientated, brilliant at being able to work out what's possible with what they have. Go and sit in an outpatients department, just listen to what patients say. Just listen. Listening is a key skill for leaders, can't be overemphasized. And it's too often too easy to take sound bites rather than genuinely understanding. And I suppose the last thing I really want to just focus on is something that Donna said around, we've got to change our experience of health and care. And we've been having some conversations at AQUA around how do you bring lived experience into a room at the start of the conversation, not when you've got the nice shiny little plan and the algorithm and the pathway, but how do you bring users into a room in such a way that colleagues can hear them? It's no good having them there as token, and certainly one of my things that I was told was, I don't want to be the tokenistic user, Sue. I actually want to feel I'm there and that people value my contribution. So I think that there's something really key around, it's not just about having citizens there, but it's about enabling them and enabling the listening of them. And that's not always easy. And we were talking around, you know, I think that we're ready for a new power, and the new power is staff voice and user voice together, driving the values that deliver the outcomes that we need. We need to start thinking about that interaction and the relationship of givers and receivers. And we are all in that situation. And I will share something about, you know, the reason why. I don't know what Neil shared with you at the beginning, but I've had to have last 5 days I've been in Portugal because my mum, who's 79, managed to mistake a curtain for a wall and fell. She'd already had 2 hips replaced. She's blind, and she managed to smash one of her hips and do some really good, yeah, she made a good mess of it. She spent 3 days on a trolley. Obviously, we were trying to sort out insurance and the rest of it. But the stark difference between public provision and private provision, horrendous. We think we have it bad. You know, my mum spent 3 days on a trolley, and one of those days she had a flare up of irritable bowel syndrome. No curtains, no screens, just sat on a bedpan. In fact, suggested that she might be better with, there was a diaper on. Now, I think that if we ever lose our respect for people's dignity and the role that we have as leaders to ensure that they feel respected and that the care that we give is a privilege to be giving it, we've lost the plot. So I think that the new power has got to be listening to staff who know what needs to improve and marrying that up with how that improvement needs to be experienced by those who receive it. And so from my point of view, so mum is okay, 6.5 hours in theatre. And can I just tell you, the young registrar who came to speak to me, he said, I am proud of my work. And then proceeded to show me the x-ray with quite a lot of metalwork in there, but precision engineering at its best. And he was proud that he'd taken the time to do his best. That's what we've got to get back into our NHS, our social care, our third sector, that we're proud of what we're able to do, because that's been, it's dulled at the moment, it's dulled. So from my point of view, and in summary, the 3 things I think that you've got to really think about when you're a leader is you have a voice and you need to use it well. You have ears and you need to use them really well. But the one thing that you have as a leader is the opportunity to influence others. And you need to do that with care, with courtesy, and with respect. And if you're able to use those elements, then you're able to work with the most challenged organisations in the most difficult of circumstances and find the way through. Because there isn't anything that doesn't have an opportunity to be improved. But what you've got to do is make that first step feel achievable. And at the moment, I think a lot of our colleagues feel it's not, because the ask feels to be so big. So those were the points I wanted to share. I'm happy to take questions for sort of 5 minutes or so. And I've probably blown all the timings that the team have worked really carefully to do. I just need to find it. Tell me, have I blown the timings?
You're doing fine, Sue. Yeah, but it would be a bad idea to go to the reflective space on the same note.
No, see, isn't that a nice way of managing? So absolutely. Let's have 5 minutes? Well, 7 minutes worth of questions, and then we're going to put you into the small groups to give you a chance for some reflection. That fair, Louise? Yeah, great. So, question, what are you most proud of, Sue? What am I most proud of? I'm most proud that I can sleep at night because I know I've done the best I can do with whatever I've been given, and that I still have good relationships with people who hated the sight of me. Not only hated the sight of me, but actually in one situation wrote a letter to say, we don't want an improvement director, thank you very much, and we certainly don't want her. And I still have positive relationships with those individuals. So that's my most proudest achievement. I have relationships. Any other questions that the team have picked up in the chat? I'm trying really hard to sort of keep up with it.
I don't think there has been any other questions unless I've missed one. Lots of positive comments, but I think you've seen most of those as well, haven't you, Sue?
Okay, I can't. So shall we then take the time to go into the breakout rooms? And this is where all the magic happens, as you know. What do you think? Yeah, great question. Sustained improvement. Yeah, really difficult to do at the moment in the context that we have. So we're going to be giving you an opportunity to go into smaller groups. As you can see, there's some instructions on the screen. So we do need somebody that's going to be able to give back the headlines, really. But we thought a good chunk of time, really, for you to just share your reflections on what you've heard, different perspectives, and especially that what's touched you on a personal level. And while you're doing that, I'm actually going to drink the coffee that Graham brought in. Can we work our magic, please, Manor? So I'm trusting that the magic of whatever has happened and that we are all back in the room. We did ask people to just nominate a spokesperson, but as is always the case, I'd had a question asked of me, and mid-response, I magicked into the ether and landed back in this space here. So I am going to just start with that. And that was around, as a leader, how do you ensure that your way of being is also reflected in the way that other leaders in your organisation, your managers, are also reflecting that in the same way? And that they are able to hear when it's not right. Because you can create an environment where speaking up and saying that it doesn't feel right for me is excluding rather than including. And so it was Deborah that asked the question. And I think there's a couple of things from my point of view. And the first is there's something around being able to share your own challenges and the things that have made you sit up, and actually inviting feedback, not waiting for it, inviting it. So what did I do that worked well? What could I do that would be better? And so that you start to role model with your broader team, that you have to create the environment that people are able to bring their true selves. And that means that what might work for one doesn't work for another. But proactively enabling the conversation, not one of reaction all the time. So can I ask people just to pop their hand up or find some way of letting me know what you'd like to share back from the conversations that you had in your groups? Tracy.
Hi, Sue.
Hi.
Just hold my hand so it's not distracting. The group agreed I'd give some feedback of what our discussions were. We focused on sort of pulling out the point, what we thought was poignant things to us that we heard today. So, and to say thank you. So first of all, it was around a lot about functioning of team and what team is. sort of the wider team, the missed opportunities for collaborations and silos. We could all relate to that and the frustrations that may bring and how to get around that. We also talked around honesty, that we all to be honest to yourself and that authenticity as a leader and not having to mold into something because you felt you needed to, but also the levels of how or you can be honest in organizations depending on where you are in that organization. We were really inspired by what Donna was saying, for example. However, sometimes that honesty, depending on the culture of your organization, may actually shut doors depending on how it's delivered or how it's done rather than open. But then there's always the windows, I suppose, which we didn't really discuss. We definitely talked a lot about having time to yourself, time to getting to know your teams, not making assumptions, and cultures, about relationships and strengths. We talked a little about psychological safety, and that actually if you really want it, which talked about, that's what I suppose we've just been talking about now, bringing people in that they feel that they're able to contribute and not be judged on that. And was there anything else? Because I just wrote some notes really quickly. Yeah, so I think it's just really about looking at strengths and then working together. What do we bring? I hope I've represented the feedback, what people discussed well.
We've got some thumbs up, so I think that might be, yeah. Kevin.
Take myself off mute. Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I think I was in group 6 and we were very much talking about, all very much saying how it was really nice to have very real conversations, where we're really sort of talking about the real issues and being realistic about actually, the state of things. And I think that's a real point that we picked up on. I think part of being authentic as a leader is actually really being realistic and saying, okay, this is the situation and this is how it is. Where again, there seems to be a wider tendency to sort of skirt over the uncomfortable truth and really sort of silence those voices out who are sort of challenging with, again, more positivity. Let's double down on the positivity and actually all the problems might go away. And we know that they generally will not unless we actually look at some solutions. And again, we talk with that again in relation to, I think, Donna's point really of, we sort of see this cycle of new strategies and change, and obviously people become change fatigue, they get like kind of change fatigue. And also, I think what happens then is when we come in and we try and change things for the better, people don't get on board. Because again, they're skeptical about change. I think again, prior to some of my role coming to Northwest Employers, I spent 7 years in local government, and people, they are change fatigue, but also I think they associate change now with loss. As in, it results in loss, and not only does it result in loss, it results in them having more to do. So with that, again, we were sort of saying it, it really needs to sort of build that trust back in. And again, I think it's that sort of open, vulnerable, realistic leadership is really important to that. And as I say, for me, I bring my whole self to work, and I encourage my team to bring their whole self to work. And again, I think that makes it easier then, because we talked also about, being, the vulnerable leader and being sort of an open lead, but also how do we then sort of transfer into doing the some of the difficult conversations and the business side of leadership. And I think actually the former makes the latter easier, because again, I think when you are open and people see you as an individual, and we see each other as individuals and value our individuality, actually when we have to have those more formal conversations, it's easy because people already have that trust and they know you as the person, and they know you're wearing that different hat for that period of time. So that was really a lot of our discussion. And as I say, yeah, I think it was just good to sort of again have a real conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it, that the value of these sessions is the bringing together of different perspectives, and it doesn't matter how. I mean, and let's be really clear, this has been really well planned. I mean, the team have done a great job, but we never seem to have enough time for those honest conversations. So I think there is something for all of us. Do we make that space and time as well? Elaine.
Thanks, Sue. And I was in a group 3 with Suzanne James, Ruth, Katie, Gillis and Claire, and we all really loved the honesty and valued that openness that all 3 of you as speakers gave us. So thank you. It's certainly been one of the most interesting sessions I've been to for a while. And what we liked is that you were talking not just and telling us not just interesting stories, but engaging stories. And I think the stories part is important, and that narrative, the way we communicate as leaders is really important. Tracy, I raised a question about her compassionate leadership because it felt quite tough love in some ways, the way she was speaking and some of the things she was doing, you know, this concept of moving people on. And we discussed how could we do that? And there was a great suggestion that maybe in our environment, it's moving people on from here to somewhere else. But that in itself is quite time consuming, isn't it? I'm sure people have experienced. There was also that idea of focusing on what's going right and building on that rather than keep going back to what went wrong. And we're really good at doing that in institutions. We just go back and focus on who did it wrong and whose fault was it. So that mindset change, I think, you know, you were all talking about was important. Again, we did raise that it's not always as safe as maybe we might like it to be when you're speaking truth to power. That's a really vulnerable position you're putting yourself into, and often they don't want to hear that honest feedback, even though they want you to be authentic, they want you to be open, but they don't want to hear what you've got to say. So Sue, I'm sure you've had more experience than most of us in that, but you did change that language, and that's fantastic. And that led us into a conversation about whether authenticity and honesty were the same. And we could have been talking about that all afternoon, but it's how you communicate what's happening to your teams, and maybe not telling people quite everything doesn't make you less open, but you know, it's maybe stopping them having some of the pain that you had to experience.
Elaine, I mean, I think genuinely, I mean, and I'm sure Donna will agree, you have to buffer your team. Right. That's part of being a leader, because you have a responsibility to create the environment for your team to be able to work at its best. And that means that they don't need to know some of those behind closed doors conversations, because it would not help.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And then we did talk, Donna, about the relief, actually, some of us, and I certainly felt hearing you say something I've said often, which is the system's broken. And being able to speak that out loud. We hear the language of business as usual, and actually we don't really want that. We talked about is business as usual, what we need, what we want. That idea and redirecting budgets, doing pretty radical things, thinking radical things. We have to get there, and we have to have the time to think about that. We discussed that because we all agreed that the status quo is not sustainable. And just a reflection, you know, as leaders, I believe we've got a responsibility to speak out about that. So thank you for the opportunity to listen to you and feedback.
Thanks, Elaine. Appreciate that. And next, I've got Vicky's hand up.
Hiya, thank you. Just a couple of quick things because I know we're pushed for time. It was very interesting that even from listening to the talks this morning, one of our members in the group had been so inspired that she sent off an email about her role as a leader being more visible in a non-exec director role. So that was immediate response from such great conversation this morning. So I'd just like to celebrate that. We talked a lot about authenticity and vulnerability. And actually, you know, it's really hard to be vulnerable as a leader because there are certain expectations around you, aren't you? And there's a couple of hats or multiple hats that you have to wear at any one time. And going on about, you know, knowing oneself and being brave, as you talked about, for inviting others' honesty is a real challenge, because you have to do something with that, don't you, as a leader, when you're told something. If you invite that honesty and you invite that, then it's about being authentic to follow that through. And we talked about understanding this importance of the little things. You know, if you're going to a plan and away day, do it. Don't just say you're going to do it. Don't be tokenistic, because that disengages your teams around you. And it sometimes is the little things that is the final straw, isn't it? Certainly that's, you know, what I think anyway. So just a lot about communication and the importance of knowing one's true self, and following that through.
Thanks, Vicky. And Karen?
Hi, I was in Group 8. I think, first of all, you know, I think we all agree we was inspired by all the speakers this morning. You know, what they said was absolutely fantastic and gives you a lot of food for thought. I think, you know, and again, I'll go quickly. I think everybody agrees people want the opportunity to be heard. We are all individuals, and how we're managed and how we're, you know, is individual to that person, because we are different people. You know, body language is so important when you're dealing with people. We love the almost the thing about having two ears, you know, and one mouth, and to use that accordingly, because it's massively important as a leader. You're listening more than you're speaking to people, you know. To encourage challenging, because, you know, done in the right way, challenging, regardless whether it's upwards, downwards or sideways, is massively important as a team to grow. And one of the big thing is how do you get people to actually open up, because we found, you know, people find that quite difficult, and to gain that trust, because trust isn't something that just as same as respect, it just doesn't happen naturally. You have to earn it as leaders and as a team to your leader. And that when everything happens like this, that it brings a vibrant workplace, great work ethic, and where people want to be. That goes back to what Tracy Neville was saying. She never felt like she went to work because she loved it that much. So yeah, it was just, I found it really fantastic, and I know the rest of the group did. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And as you can see, my team is really good at managing me, because clearly now I'm in bother because of the time. However, I am going to take the liberty to just sum up some things that I've heard in terms of the feedback. Particularly thank Tracy and Donna. But I think that there's sort of maybe 4 points that I've heard. I think the first is that understanding yourself, your motivations and your values as a leader helps you navigate, because your values are a constant. And it's that coming back to, can I live with myself in this? Am I doing the best that I'm able to do? There's something around recognizing that as a leader, you do have to role model and recognize that that visibility is critical if you're going to be able to impact the culture and how others feel. And that means investing in that. And Donna said she's shy. From a Myers-Briggs point of view, my strongest preference is introversion. So it doesn't mean that just because you need that quiet time, personal time, you have still, as a leader, a responsibility to others. And I think there is something about servant leadership. You know, we've talked about it in the past. Maybe that's a motivator that we need to get back in touch with. Third point I'd like to pick up on is something that was said around compassion. Compassion doesn't mean soft. You know, let's be really clear. Bust that myth. Compassion means that you are able to do tough things in a kind way. Kindness is absolutely the core of how you should interact with everybody. But that doesn't mean you can't do difficult things. And, you know, there was a comment about, you know, one of the things I learned in that national role was those chief executives didn't suddenly turn bad. You know, suddenly they didn't lose their skills and abilities, but the context around them changed and the fit maybe wasn't as good as it needed to be. We have to get better at how we support people to move to different places where those skills are equally important in that context at that time. And that it is not failure to need to move. It's about fit and organisations need different styles of leadership at different times. And that, I think, from a personal point of view, it also means sometimes you have to make the decision that you're not right anymore, and that you need to make that decision to leave. So I think that's the third thing. And the last is, and really powerful, those personal stories, the pivotal things that you experience that actually become those rocks in your jar. They are your anchors when the going's tough. And I think that the more we can hear colleagues, service users, citizens, our community, and the greater the opportunity we have to be able to make a difference. And on that note, I'd like to encourage you all, if you can, to complete the evaluation. Thank you to the partners for support in being able to put on this type of masterclass. And with Donna, I'm not a master, never have been, never will. I just care, and I think that Tracy and Donna equally care, and that as a motivator for making a difference is probably as good as any. So thank you everybody for your time this morning, really appreciate it, and look forward to putting together our series for this coming year.